What's up, folks? It's the Bearded Bass Man here with you. And for this video, I thought I would cover a topic that I actually get asked about quite often. That topic being, what are the main types of fishing line available to anglers today? I'm going to cover key points such as um, cost, characteristics of each line, and other little tips and hints that'll help you figure out which line you need to use for your own application. So go ahead, sit back, stay tuned, and let the BBM drop some knowledge on you. Yeah, baby. Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back, folks. I decided I'd break this video down into discussing the three main types of fishing line that you're going to encounter when you're in the store. I'm not going to go over fusion lines or hybrids or things of that nature. I'm actually just going to break it down into the three main, which are going to be monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid. I'm going to start things out explaining some of the characteristics and the points of monofilament, and then go to braid and fluorocarbon at the end. I'm going to try to keep them as condensed as possible. If anybody has more questions, I'll definitely answer them, and I have no problem doing that. Just go ahead and put them down in the comments below, and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. But for the most part, I think you'll get the gist, and it won't be too complicated to understand. The first kind we're going to jump into is monofilament, or mono as most anglers will go ahead and call it. Monofilament actually gets its name from just that. It's one single strand of a nylon fiber, as opposed to many different fibers woven together, which is what you'll get in braid and other types of line. And one of the big things about monofilament is it stretches. It's very, very stretchy. And because of that, it's really easy to work with. It has kind of a supple nature compared to fluorocarbon, and it's a little more manageable than some other lines. It also stretches under pressure, which when you set the hook, it actually keeps from just ripping the fish's face off. In doing that it actually stretches, its shock strength is a lot higher than braid. When you set the hook, if you set the hook hard onto a heavy fish, it's not going to snap right off and the fish is going to be gone. It actually takes a good bit of shock pressure to break monofilament line. Unfortunately, with monofilament line, when it comes to diameter, when you get big tensile strength or pound test, you're running into big diameters. They go anywhere from, I think, some of the smallest I've seen is 1.7 pounds to you can get like weed eater string size. Because of it being a monofilament and a nylon fiber, when you get those higher tensile strength, you're gonna get bigger diameters. It kind of goes hand in hand with this type of line. Another big characteristic of monofilament is its sink rate. It's actually pretty buoyant. It does absorb some water which causes it to sink fairly slow, but it's just that. It doesn't sink really fast, and it doesn't float. Because it doesn't sink really fast or float, it's a real good line to use if you're using like a suspended jerkbait or any kind of reaction bait such as that. Pretty good when it comes to topwater, because it doesn't sink real fast like fluorocarbon. Monofilament is kind of the do-all line. You can pretty much use it for whatever application you want. You can catfish with it, you can bass fish with it. When you're bass fishing, you can use it for any kind of tactic or technique. It doesn't really have a specific technique to be using it for. Price point, it's very, very, very cheap. It's very easy to find too. You could pretty much go into any store right now and pick yourself up a spool of monofilament, and it won't break the bank by any means. Even your higher end shelf lines, they're not going to be that expensive just because of the process it takes to make and the materials that it uses. Knot strength, it's incredibly strong when it comes to tying knots. You don't have to be a sailor or a Boy Scout to tie a specific knot with this type of line and have it hold. It's going to retain a very good knot pressure. It's not going to just snap right off or anything like that, and that goes again with that shock strength we were talking about a little earlier. Trade-off is obviously the size diameters, because you're getting higher tensile strength, you're going to get that higher diameter, and really other than you're going to jump into things like UV, if you leave it out for a extended period of time, it's going to deteriorate with the sun. But other than that, there's not a lot of drawbacks to monofilament. That's another reason why it's preferred by a lot of anglers, weekend anglers and professionals alike, is because there's not a lot of trade-off. There's not a lot of downside to monofilament. Monofilament is not a line that's necessarily going to let you down and clutch. Next up, we're going to talk about braid. And braid, unlike monofilament, is several strands of a material actually woven together to produce one single strand that you're going to be fishing with. Most of the time, you're going to see the strands bulked up into what they call carriers. And you're going to either have 4, 6, or 8 carrier braid. 8 character is going to be your more expensive, your little top tier, and 4 obviously being a little cheaper, a little lower level. Doesn't mean anything other than how many strands actually make up each solid strand. When it comes to braid, the big thing about braid, and the big thing fishermen like and anglers like, is its sensitivity. Because it doesn't have any stretch, unlike the monofilament. Monofilament stretches a lot. Braid stretches almost none. Because it doesn't stretch, the sensitivity is through the roof. You'll actually, you can feel pebbles, bedrock, shells, anything like that. Say you're dragging a jig or a crankbait or something like that, you're pretty much going to feel everything. Also translating, you're going to feel that slightest of nibbles. Monofilament, because like I said, as it stretches, doesn't have that sensitivity that your braid's going to have. The downside to that lack of stretch is, as we talked about with monofilament, the shock strength. Braid has very, very low shock strength. When you set the hook on a heavy fish, if you're laying the lead to it, that line's not going to be able to withstand the same amount of pressure that the monofilament had. Also, going against monofilament, when you go into the tensile strength, you can go up to 100 pounds, and you're going to have a very small diameter compared to the monofilament and the fluorocarbon. Even when it comes to, say, 25-pound test or something like that, even 10, 12-pound test, which is fairly thick when it comes to monofilament or fluorocarbon, it's like thread to braid. Diameters are crazy thin when you're talking about a braid or a super line. Some of the trade-offs with braid is, as we talked about, shock strength, setting that hook, not having the same type of shock strength. You're going to go with knot strength. Knot strength is not great with braid. Not saying that it's not perfect, but a lot of favorite type of knots that fishermen use, it's not going to hold up the same as it would with monofilament. Another thing that you kind of trade off was it fades out. It comes in different colors, and it doesn't take long in the sun for the UV to actually bake those colors right out of it, especially the bright colors like the reds or the blues, and even some of the darker colors like green. It doesn't take much to fade those out and let them wash out. Another good thing about braid is it doesn't have a lot of memory. So a lot of folks, when you're pulling it up on spinning reels or something like that, it takes a lot to actually still get those little loop-de-loops in there. Downside of that is when you get a backlash with braid, it's a backlash. It's going to dig into the spool, and it's going to be a headache and a nightmare to get out. Another big drawback from braid is visibility. Because it's a thick, multi-strand type of fishing line, fish can see it from a long ways off. It doesn't really disappear in the water column the way monofilament and fluorocarbon does. When you're fishing in murkier water, like jig fishing or trash fishing and stuff like that, that's not going to matter. So you're not going to be as much worried about it when you're heavy fishing. But if you're finesse fishing or light wire fishing, that's going to be a big trade-off that you might not want to deal with. Now, the third and final type of line we're going to talk about is fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon is a really close relative of monofilament. It's just the molecules are a lot more compact than they were with the monofilament. This actually translates into that sensitivity thing where the braid has more sensitivity than monofilament. Fluorocarbon has more sensitivity than monofilament. It's right in the middle of the two. The big thing about fluorocarbon is it is near invisible in the water. It disappears really quickly in the water column, which, you know, if you're gonna trade one way or the other between braid and monofilament, fluorocarbon is going to be your go-to thing. A lot of benefits with it. It's abrasive resistance when you're fishing in riprap or around things that might actually wear on your line. Fluorocarbon, because of the molecules being so tightly bonded, it resists extremely well to just small little nicks and cuts and wears and things of that case. Toughness, it's pretty tough. It's not quite on par with braid, obviously, because it's not as tightly woven as multi-strands. Way more stronger than monofilament. One of the big uses with fluorocarbon is actually drop shotting, and the reason of that is because it sinks. It doesn't absorb any water like monofilament, so it doesn't sink slowly. It sinks rapidly. It's heavy. When you're using a drop shot or something like that, you're going to want to use this for leader material. Actually, a lot of fly fishermen use fluorocarbon, as their leader material because it sinks, especially when you're using wet flies or weighted flies or something like that. It's perfect for that, just because of its sinking characteristic. Trade-offs with fluorocarbon are the knot strength. When it comes to knot strength, if you don't wet the line when you're making the knot, that knot is garbage. It will break almost 100% of the time. It has a lot of the trade-offs that monofilament has. Shock strength. It kind of falls between braid and monofilament. It's not great, but it's not horrible either. As I said, the big time you're going to use it is obviously when you're using sinking baits, stuff like that. You're not going to use it for top water at all because of its sink rate. When it comes to UV, both of the others deteriorating in the sun, fluorocarbon really doesn't. Not that would matter with a lot of fishermen anyway, but that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're trying to decide what kind of line you need to use. Well, folks, I hope some of this actually helped you out. I hope you have a little better understanding what kind of line you might want to pick and what kind of line you want to use for each application you might choose. If you're wondering why I did this video in my car, it's because it's about 100 degrees outside and my car has air conditioning. Feel free to ask any kind of questions. I kind of went over that stuff a little quick, just some brief bullet points. I'm sure I left out a whole bunch, but that's just kind of the main characteristics. Keep in mind that although they're three different kinds of lines, they overlap, and it doesn't really matter if you're using one more than the other or hardly using one or another, or no experience with the other one whatsoever. As long as you're out on the bank and you're casting and you're wetting a line, it doesn't matter what kind of line gets you out there. You're not necessarily going to lose more fish or catch more fish with one line or the other. A lot of folks grew up with monofilament. A lot of folks grew up with braid. Braid is actually one of the oldest type of fishing line out there. So it's not really going to say that you're going to catch one fish more than the other. I just wanted to briefly clear up and give some insight. As I said, this is one topic that I'm actually asked about a lot, so I would go ahead and make a video about it. That way it just kind of inform some folks, whether you be a weekend angler or a seasoned pro. Maybe I gave you some information you didn't necessarily already know. So, as always, if you liked the video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. It definitely helps me. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. And as always, I'm the Bearded Bassman saying, thanks for watching.